We'll call to order the Whatcom Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting Thursday, May 16th, 2024. Vicki, can we start with roll call, please?
Yes, Donovan.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Cortice.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Darwin.
Present.
All right, and do we have Executive Sadhu? I'm not seeing him on Zoom yet, or Board Member Stewart are both absent at the moment, but we do have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item C, citizen communications. Is there anyone online? Sorry, that was.
It was like Board Member Stewart's there.
Oh, okay.
Let me correct, we do have Board Member Stewart with us. Good morning. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Is there anyone online that would like to unmute and speak to the board? And I don't see anyone in person. Did we have anything come in this morning or last night?
I didn't see anything. Vicki, anything come to you on citizen comments?
No.
All right, thanks. Okay, item D1, consideration of a contract award for automated passenger counters. Josh.
Well, good morning. We're asking the board of directors to authorize the general manager to enter into a 2-year agreement with Clever Devices for the purposes of installation, purchase, installation, and validation of automated passenger counters for an amount not to exceed $754,000, and execute any extensions of the contract and approve any change orders with the general manager's approval authority without the need for further board approval. This 2-year agreement will install automated passenger counters. These are devices that sit above each of the doors on our fixed route fleet, and they count as people get on and off the bus, so our boarding and alighting. Right now, we rely almost entirely on our fare box and our fare collection system for counting boardings, but we don't have any method to count where people get off. We supplement that boarding data by having surveyors ride the bus periodically and count how many people are getting on and off. And we use that as a sample set to submit for our national transit database requirements, which is part of our requirements for our federal grant money. We also use that data in other ways within planning to help understand routes and where ridership is and stuff like that. But currently our fare box system does not give us a complete picture, nor does the sampling adequately identify which stops are being used all the time and where people are getting on and off. This will take us a little over 2 years as we work through this. It takes about a year for us to get approval from the FTA to use this system on an ongoing basis to submit our NTV data, and that's why the implementations.
Were you done? Okay. This is, I think, super exciting from a planning perspective as well, that it gives us a more complete picture as opposed to the surveying that we're currently forced to do to figure out where people are getting off, and trying to figure out where people are getting on, but also where they're getting off as we're trying to design where the system and meet needs. So this is a very exciting thing that brings us farther along in that process. So I appreciate all the work that's going into it. Do you want to talk a little bit about the grant?
Yeah, sorry. We did receive a Washington State bus and bus facilities grant from WashDOT for this, for an 80% match up to $640,000. So that's covering $640,000 of the project. We expect the total project cost to be about $930,000. And we've got most of that budgeted. We're about 130 short this year, but we have some flexibility in the capital budget if we need to cover that. And then some other costs, the other out year costs will be included in the next year's budget.
Is there an operating expense once it's going?
There is, yeah, there's 2 components to that. We do the primary software that manages all the counting and tracks all of it is software as a service, and so we pay for that. We also pay some hardware warranty on it as well. And then we have staff who will need, mainly our fleet electronics technicians, who will have to kind of go out and make sure they're working periodically, calibrate them, fix them if they're broken.
Todd?
Yeah, thanks. So I don't know if this is a question or not. It's a question. If this wasn't like required data that we have to report and we weren't getting a grant, would we be spending $930,000 on this?
I think so. It's been on our list of things to do since 2004 as a pretty important data set for us. Most other agencies our size implemented this a decade ago. We waited because we needed to implement our computer-aided dispatch and automatic vehicle location system, or CAD-AVL system, in 2020, and we implemented that. And so we needed to get that implemented first, and that would allow us to move forward with this project.
Thanks.
We've been at a significant disadvantage not having complete data on our boardings and alightings. There's major weaknesses with our current system with boarding. It's not entirely reliable, for one thing, and then obviously we don't have the alightings. So this would enable us to do more system optimization, so we could better tell where people need the service, where they're riding, and make some service adjustments on the basis of this more complete count of data. So I think from a planning perspective, this is really important to have good data on those ridership patterns.
Michael?
Do we own this equipment, and what is the warranty on it, and what will Clever Devices, what's their responsibility if the devices aren't working? Josh, you said our own technicians will check on them daily and make sure they're working, but what if they're really not working?
Yeah. Well, I mean, through the project process and through the certification process, which takes over a year, they have to kind of guarantee that they're working through that process. So there's a whole checkoff process that we go through. And what we have to do actually in 2026 is we have to continue doing the survey, continue doing the counting through the fare box, and compare that data with the data that these are collecting in an automated fashion. And that's part of our NTD certification process. And then they go through and a statistician kind of compares that data, figures out the samples versus those others to make sure that they're working. Post-project implementation, once we've got that baseline of they're working, we have their software set helps identify if there's gaps or issues. So if a piece of hardware has failed and all of a sudden it's not counting, it'll alert us to that. And then the devices themselves are warranted for a period of time, I think about 5 years, after which point we just replace the device. The devices themselves are a significant portion of the project, but a lot of the project costs are also going into that certification and validation process, the installation effort as well. So to replace an individual unit, they're about $2,000 a unit. So if we do have individual failures here and there, we'll replace them fixed if it's beyond their warranty period. I believe that it's a 5-year warranty cycle. We keep our buses for about 12 years. So, some of our intent there is to, have them working for the hardware should last the 12-year life cycle of the bus.
Do you want to cover the project timeline?
Yeah, so getting going as soon as possible is important because we're trying to have everything installed and validated on our end by January 1st, because we have to do a full calendar year of parallel counting and assessment. And so if we miss January 1st, we got to wait a year and we don't want to do that. So we're working hard to hit that calendar year.
And that's FTA
requirement, yeah, so that they can then accept the data and allow us to use that data when we submit on our monthly, quarterly, and annual reports to the National Transit Database. It'll take about a year to do we'll spend a year doing data collection, then we'll spend the first quarter, maybe the first half of 26, submitting all that information, validating, and so forth. So it's going to take us essentially into about this time in 26.
So would this also kind of solve the problem of, I know that Western is talking about changing their cards. this would solve the counting problem of that at least, right? Like they could show a card if it, I don't know.
Yeah.
It wouldn't help at all.
Well, it can, and I think there's a couple different ways. We're exploring alternative options of fare collection with Western that might involve the APCs. I think there's options down the road in fare collection in general to think about alternative methods of counting. Right now, we count everything through a tap, a swipe, or
Right,
a
yeah.
bill or coin inserted. There might be opportunities at Western or other locations to utilize passenger counts instead and get revenue maybe from organizations or other groups rather than individuals. And so this would certainly allow for that. So create some new opportunities there. It would also allow us a better, more accurate representation of Western ridership, because we do know that as it gets busier, our fare collection system becomes a less accurate method of counting, as sometimes people are just kind of, we're trying to get 20 people on at a stop,
Right.
it gets a little harder to make sure everyone taps and
Yeah.
everyone swipes and things like that.
And one more key data point that allows us to have is load information, which we can't currently collect. And so currently we're looking at Western service and trying to provide some efficiencies. One of the big elements is, as we're seeing buses come through and we're picking up loads, what are those kind of leave behinds? And it's really hard to assess the data. You get different reports, and it's generally reported by operators. The bus may not be completely full, but they think it's full. And so this will allow us to know the exact numbers of individuals on a certain bus and there. And it could actually be done we could adjust day by day if we need to, and adjust the service accordingly and get the right number of buses for those loads. So that's a really key piece of this information as well.
And that load data is coming in real time, and so our dispatch can see that and make adjustments, as well as that information will also be available to the public, so they can go to their apps and things like that and see the load on different routes as well. So they can be like, oh, that one's busy, I better plan to catch the next one or something like that.
I move approval of awarding the contract for automated passenger counters.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion or questions or anything? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None. All right, thank you very much. D2, consideration of contract award for new mobile data terminals. It's the Josh day.
Well, thank you. Well, again, asking to authorize the general manager to enter into this time a 1-year agreement with Clever Devices for purchase, installation, and configuration of the new mobile data terminals for a cost not to exceed $440,000, and executing extensions of the contract, approving change orders with general manager's approval authority without the need for further board approval. This is really more of a state of good repair. We have equipment that we purchased back in 2018, and they reached their 5-year end of life. They were both, not only are they starting to fail physically, the vendors kind of has end of life them as well, and so aren't really able to supply replacement units anymore. So this switches us to the new model of that product. And these MDTs are the little computers that sit on the dashboards of our paratransit buses, and they provide the manifest. They're critical to our operations in that they provide the list of who's supposed to be picked up where. They provide a map of how to get there. They provide communication information about that they've arrived, where the driver's at, what they're doing, messaging with dispatch and so forth. And so they're really kind of the heart of our paratransit operations out in the field. It's what the driver interacts with on a daily basis. In this case, luckily, not only are we replacing equipment that's end of life, we're actually getting equipment that we think will last longer than the last ones did, as well as enhance a number of features that, frankly, we asked for the first time around, but they weren't able to deliver with their current hardware. So we're getting an expanded manifest view, better mapping, and a number of other tools that will help the drivers actually out in the field with this latest group of devices. We'll be installing hopefully about 30 of them this year, and the remaining 16 next year. And so we budgeted $350,000 in 2024, and then we'll get the additional funding, request additional funding next year.
answered my questions. Anyone else?
I'll move, we approve the contract award for new mobile data terminals.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. That passes. Item D3, consideration of request for authorization to enter into ground lease negotiations for the Linden Station project. Les.
Yes, so I apologize that this went out. We had to put it out before we had made a recommendation on this. The team was trying to finish off looking at things and making a recommendation. So what we're recommending is that the board authorize the general manager to enter into ground lease negotiations with Catholic Community Services of Western Washington for the design, construction, and operation of a transit-friendly workforce affordable housing development. This is an exciting time. I guess I should say that this authorizes us to enter into negotiations. The next steps will be negotiating with them about a letter of intent and then turning it into the ground lease. So there are multiple touch points for the board, and if those negotiations don't work out, we'd ask the board to look at the other applicants and start talking with them. We're very excited to make this recommendation. We received 2 amazing applications for this. Applications, responses to the request for qualification. Both entities, super experienced, great staffs, very capable and enthusiastic, big-hearted folks that want to do right by the community. That's a good position to be in. Unfortunately, we had to pick one, and based on Catholic Community Services extensive experience in the farm worker agricultural community, as well as an extensive, they've been in this game since 1988, making that recommendation. They are, Catholic Community Services has about 3,000 units across Western Washington. Those are across a variety of housing typologies, including farm workers. They have 475 farm worker units. Workforce, veterans, seniors, special needs, and so forth. They have some experience in transit-oriented development projects. They have 2 of those that they've worked on, one in Shoreline, one in Seattle. They have another project that involved FTA funding that was a surplus transit property. So they have some experience in this area, and that project was on along Aurora Avenue and Highway 99. So they have experience on that. As far as north of Seattle and Whatcom and Skagit, they have 5 properties in Whatcom and 6 in Skagit. So they have experience north of Seattle as well. They also have existing partnerships here in Whatcom County, including with the county, but also with other nonprofits and hospitals. So Peace Health, they have a good relationship with, including they had a letter of support from Peace Health. The Agape nonprofit is working with them. And then one of the other things that they have a lot of experience in is the practical components of making these things work. So things like working with the local community on the entitlement process, the financing and funding. They talked a lot about their pro forma developments and how they go about that. They have extensive experience with community and stakeholder outreach, so that they're designing a project that fits with the community and the stakeholders. And then construction, and then really important too is the operation of it, the post construction. Got a lot of experience in doing that. And then also with how they maintain the properties and their philosophy on how they do that. So we had a selection team of 7 folks, including 2 representatives from outside organizations with experience in affordable housing, workforce development housing to help us. So that's ultimately what we came to the conclusion. we believe that Catholic Community Services will develop a project that City of Linden residents out there, the folks that ultimately live there, and importantly, WTA will be proud of. And they, I guess, because of their experience in transit-oriented development, had good ideas on how to incorporate transit to make sure that component, which is super important, obviously, to us on that. So next steps, as I mentioned, when I say letter of intent, I don't know if that's the actual term we'll use, but talk about letter of intent and then use that as a basis to go into the ground lease negotiations. We'll be updating the board throughout. The board has approval of it, so there's multiple touch points for the board to influence as we go through that. I'll pause there. Shonda and Maureen were both on the committee, and I'll ask if there are any things that I'm missing that you would like to add to that.
Hit all my points.
Okay.
Couldn't have been a tougher choice.
Right.
I'll move that we authorize the WTA to enter into this ground lease negotiations process
Second.
for the Linden Station Line.
Second.
All right, Michael.
I'm really pleased to see us at this milestone, fully in support of the project. Just a little request or suggestion. The city has had some development agreements that didn't always work out, or they didn't have a clear timeline on them. I don't mean to be suspicious or distrustful of Catholic Housing Services, but for the final negotiation, it might be nice to put in some benchmarks about like how long we expect the financing, when the first shovel is turned, right? So it doesn't go on and on forever. So just some sort of reasonable timeline that's mutually agreed to.
Can do. I'm looking at Mark too. Mark will be instrumental in this.
All right.
I guess one of the things I'll say that impressed us about Catholic Community Services too is they were, in our spirit of get real, get better, they were very direct about, hey, these are, to your point, Michael, about, okay, these are tough to get through, and we can do this and persevere with grace, but we do need to have those benchmarks, guidelines, and kind of a roadmap. So, well aware.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Vicky, is Will Rice on?
Great.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, yep.
So Will Rice from Catholic Community Services is online if there are any questions for them. Or Will, if you want to say hello.
Sure, I'll just introduce myself real quick. I'm Will Rice. I'm Vice President of Catholic Community Services, Western Washington, and the agency director for our Northwest Agency, which is the 5 counties north of King County. We're just very excited about this partnership. I've been ever since the Thanksgiving floods of a few years ago up in Nooksack up in Everson, when the farm worker community up there was heavily impacted, became more acutely aware of the need for sustainable housing in North Whatcom County. And so when this conversation kind of got brought to my attention, I just thought it was so perfect, because it really has been a target of something we've really wanted to be impactful on in helping the farm worker community. So this is when this RFQ came out, it just felt like it was in our sweet spot for sure. So with that, I'll stop.
Michael?
Yeah, Will, thanks for joining us. I'm wondering if you could tell me how you feel the climate these days is for financing your project. That sometimes takes a couple years to get the package together.
Sure.
Is the climate looking good? And the county has had some housing funds starting a couple years ago, and this might be the first big capital investment. So can you tell me about the prospects for a quick financing package?
Yeah, and this gets complicated real quick, and I would once maybe if this does get approved and we get a little further down the road, we could do a presentation really with some concrete information about timelines, because the big one really will be where we fall into the queue with the low-income housing tax credit program. So we're in kind of a balance of state area, and we have been in conversations with the folks that manage that, But that will be the key indicator to say, when will we be able to go to the state with a package for commerce to be able to apply and then enter into a partnership with the state to get the federal tax credits needed for this. I'm not clear right now if we'll be in next year's cycle or the year after that cycle. But with that said, we also have to do a significant amount of work to get local dollars to support this in order for it to be an approved package that we can then take to commerce and to the federal LIHTC system. So there's plenty of moving parts that we have to determine before I would be able to satisfactorily answer your question. But once we kind of get this initial step going, then that'll be our first line of business, is really to see where we're going to fall into that queue. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I didn't hear pessimism in your voice. I just heard.
Oh, no.
Business as usual, basically.
Yeah, and the other piece, and thanks for bringing me back to that. The other piece is, we haven't built a farm worker housing property for quite some time now. Our last one was Villa Santa Fe and on Bakerview in Bellingham, and that was, I want to say, 7 years ago, maybe a little more than, right around there. And it really has been not because we haven't tried, but the state's priority to do primarily only housing for formerly homeless has really taken up the bandwidth that the farm worker projects would go into. Because we had a project slated for Everson about 6 years ago that we got all the way to the finish line, and we didn't get enough points in commerce because it wasn't a homeless project. And so we have received unofficial word that the state is now very interested in moving into some other projects other than housing for formerly homeless, that this will really, I think, be readily seen as a nice step in a direction of doing a project that's not focusing on homeless. So I am optimistic.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I don't know if you call. Two questions. First, is this agreement, I think when this was first, the concept was presented to the board, it was a 2-phase project. Am I remembering that right?
That was RMC Architects doing the massing study had thought that that would probably be the best way to do it, but that'll all be part of the discussion with.
Oh, okay. So this may be an agreement to do both phases or just one phase?
Yeah, we'll have to talk about what they feel comfortable with. I think without having discussions with Will, I would think we would try to do it in maybe 2 phases, but we'd have the ground lease that would incorporate.
Okay. And I'm super excited this is going forward. I don't remember the discussion of the population that would be using the housing as explicitly farm workers until this point. So, which, I mean, I don't know if that's something that helps get the financing, or did I miss that earlier in the discussion?
When we did the needs assessment, that was what popped to the top, was agricultural workers. But what we went out for was across the spectrum, because we didn't want to foreclose if somebody comes back and says, hey, there's a greater need after we have the partnership. So while that's the need we had heard from the community, we're going to work with Catholic community in the ground lease process to do that. That'll be part of their stakeholder outreach process. So that's the focus and what we identified the need, but we'll see as we go through the negotiations what they find in their outreach. Does that answer your question, Tom?
And Les, can I add just a point to that? Is that will be another one of those touch points when we get to the point of putting in our application to the Department of Commerce. That's where we'll really be identifying the population to be served, to be able to determine what pots of money we're trying to access.
Okay.
Shelley, you're not muted.
Sorry.
You're still not muted.
Shelley?
I'm muted, Shelley.
Shelley Davis. All right. Anything else? Motion? Anybody?
I think we did.
Oh,
We just have to vote.
I knew that.
We were just seeing if we were paying attention.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, it passes. Greg?
Yeah, I hope this isn't out of order for your meeting, but I just wanted to commend WTA for the generous investment of this precious land into this extremely high community need. So hats off to you all for making that decision. And second, it's been a great process. The RFQ process was fair and efficient. So commend you all for that. And in Catholic housing, they're a class act. So Will, if there's anything, Opportunity Council can do to support you in this project, just let me know.
Thanks, Greg. That's great.
Now you can see why it was such a hard decision.
Yeah.
Well spoken.
Yeah.
Greg and his Opportunity Council team are fantastic, super class people with huge hearts, and it was something we agonized over.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, D4, consideration of request for authorization to enter into property use agreement with Bay Ridge Community Club. Les.
Yeah, I'll do a quick introduction, and I'll turn it over to Tim, who's actually been doing, and Mark, I guess, have been doing all the work on pulling this together. But I did want to say, as we kick this off, we're bringing this to the board, even though it's a de minimis amount, because it does have some real property. It's a license, and so there's some real property interest to it. And it was less than clear in the delegation about whether it came forward or not, but felt ultimately that should bring it forward for the board's edification, as well as it's also, in my humble estimation, a good example of how a variety of different decision-making needs to work together. Land use and transit, for example, in this one, because of the way the land use is set up, trying to operate a bus out there, there's no turnaround points. So I thought that was a good example to talk about as well. So with that, I'll shut up and turn over to the person who deserves the credit. I'm working on this, Tim.
Yeah, so as this is stated, that we're seeking recommendation for the general manager to enter into a property use agreement with the Bay Ridge Community Club. This is basically the Birch Bay Estates area, just so you can have some reference. It's the opposite side of Birch Bay Estates, and that's the location where we're currently turning around the bus. Just a bit of history here. Last year, the board gave approval to remove much of the flex service up in Birch Bay and Blaine areas. We kept 3 small areas of flex service, but we did remove the flex service from this particular area. And instead, we replaced it with a fixed route service that came into this area with every trip on that particular pattern. That represents 11 stops per day. So there's 5 in one direction, 6 in the other direction. And what that has done is caused some more damage to the street, because we're operating them more than we used to. I think we used to probably 5 or 6 times a day. Now it's almost double that. That's caused some damage to the road. The road wasn't designed for large buses. It really doesn't have the substrate to really handle larger vehicles. And so we began working based on concerns from the neighborhood on assessing the area, assessing what we felt was appropriate given kind of our usage, and also given that other trucks and other vehicles are using that street as well. It's not just WT buses, but it might be delivery trucks, it might be school buses and things like that. So in light of that, we felt that there was some reasonable amount that we should provide to have repairs done now, as well as sort of an ongoing assistance for maintenance. So that's what's shown here is the $12,243, not to exceed that amount for repairs, for the more immediate repairs, and then an ongoing cost of $1,500. The last thing is just property use agreements are not that unusual. For us, what is unusual is paying an amount to use a property. In this case, it's critical that we have this turnaround if we're going to operate the way we do. There aren't a whole lot of choices to turn around the bus out here. The other option is that we don't go and serve Birch Bay Village. We turn around earlier, that would not have service, so that's the other option. But we felt that given the board's direction on service out here, that this would be a reasonable thing to do. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Right. Any questions, comments, concerns? How about a motion?
I'll just move to authorize WTA to enter into this property use agreement as presented.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? All right.
And we'll say having Devin on staff working with Andy, he's got construction experience, and so he's been fantastic at being able to go out and really look at the site and help us get to that point. So want to thank Devin.
All right, item E, the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. Any discussion on that? No. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, moving right along. Reports to the board. F1 2023 year-end financial report. Shonda.
If I could make a, which I should have done at the beginning, to ask if we could move the Vanpool electrification up to the top in case there's discussion on that. Wanted to make sure there was space. Sean and I talked about this before, so I'm catching her off guard.
I just wasn't sure what the nod was.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I should have brought this up before the meeting. I apologize. We just talked about this. So the intent of this was, as you'll recall, we a few months back asked for authorization to order replacement community Vanpool rideshare vans, and that led to a discussion about going to electrification of those vans. We had said we would look at things and come back to the board. This is that is still ongoing, but wanted to provide a status update so the board didn't think we'd forgotten, because the board was very gracious in saying we don't need a motion to tell you to do this, just keep us informed as you're doing it. So wanted to make sure that you knew we are working on it. So from an update standpoint, as our fleet mix for the Vanpool includes 7 passenger vans, 12 passenger vans, and 15 passenger vans to meet the demands and the requirements. The electrification for passenger vans is there's cargo vans, but not necessarily those large size passenger vans. So we've got that we're trying to work through on that. Looked at the hybrid side. John Bender's been doing a lot of work. The state contract has hybrid passenger vans. Unfortunately, they're not taking orders of those because the hybrid drive system component availability is at issue. So they're not taking orders on that. And in fact, as he's been poking around, a couple orders have been canceled because of this issue. Nevertheless, it's there. We still continue to work on that, and then also trying to solve the issue. We have a number that go down, so there's a number of distance. So trying to figure out the charging components of that are things we're looking at, as well as Sean is doing work with the state auditor's office on what are the regulations that go around this with charging and reimbursement of electricity and those kinds of aspects of it. So those are all underway and still continuing. They may be barriers. They're not barriers that can't be overcome, but we're still working through those. So we're also trying to see what others are doing, investigating the supply chain issue on that. Looking at, could you do some of these as smaller vehicles to meet some of the needs, but does that then affect your flexibility to grow? So there's a number of those things we're looking at. We will come back as we figure these things out, but didn't want the board to think these things weren't being worked and looked at. So I'll pause there for questions and comments, concerns, and I know Mayor Lund had some feelings on this, so I will, she's not here today, but I'll go back with her individually.
All right, anybody?
Thank you.
Yep.
I wasn't sure if that would cause discussion, so I wanted to give some time.
All right,
Flexibility.
back to F1.
All
Sean,
right, okay, so in your packet, you have the 2024, the Q4 2023 financial report. There's a discussion, I did miss a couple typos in there, I apologize for that. So I would just open that up for any questions. We had a strong year. Sales tax came in less than we anticipated, so we had a pretty high forecast for the end of the year that we based our 2024 budget off of. That didn't materialize as much as we thought, so we're watching that. But we did end up significantly under budget with operating expenses and a little over in revenues. Cash balances are still high. We still have a significant amount of the COVID relief funds sitting in cash, but we do have a lot of projects we plan to spend that down on. Any questions on 2023? There will be an exit interview with the state auditors, which will flesh this out a little bit more. They'll talk about the areas they've looked at, and we'll have a more in-depth discussion about the financials. The audit is going well. They're here, they've been here almost 4 weeks. And I don't believe we have any significant issues.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think I know we're seeing the same thing with the county's forecasted sales tax revenue coming in less than what we had budgeted, both Q1 and the last quarter last year. Do you have any hunch about why that might be?
Well, I can let you know what we had in January and February and maybe a little bit of insight. I'm glad you asked that. So January receipts came in lower than we've seen in 2 years, 5.2% below January of 2023. And the decrease was across all of the categories. So we're seeing it in retail, accommodations, and manufacturing. I don't know specifically why. February, they were 5.5% higher than 2023. So we are pretty much even with where we were January, February of last year. So we may be coming back to the board with a budget adjustment if we're seeing this go through, but we want to wait for probably 6 months of sales tax to see if it recoups. The increase in February was from retail and construction, but most of the other categories are still showing declines. So we're going to watch it and see how it looks in a few months.
Todd, are you hearing anything from your?
I think our finance director might have said it was we were looking at maybe construction being down, but I can't remember what. But it's the same thing. Like they're like we're paying attention to this for the next quarter or so because it is coming in less than what we had forecast.
Thank you.
2023 actuals and budget, it's about 8% because we expected 23 to end up higher. So we're going to monitor that. I can talk about 2024 Q1 if you'd like.
Sounds good.
I'm watching you too. Give a
Well,
question.
he had a question that the yellow line wasn't on his chart, but there's two charts.
Michael wants to complain about a chart.
Oh, I see. It's not in Q1, is it? Okay, we can fix that. Q1 turned out well. We started off well. Revenues are higher than 2023 overall, but if you look at the income statement, you can see, where sales tax was below our budget. What the budget is for this quarter is 2 months of actual, 1 month of budget for March, which is still high. So we're trying to kind of balance that out. But really all of our income streams except the operating grant revenue were down in Q1. What we are doing for operating grant revenue this year is we're going to pull in all of the Move Ahead Washington funds by November. So with I-2117 on the ballot and the potential that Move Ahead Washington will be repealed, we're going to draw down all the money that's due to WTA in this biennium before the end of this year. So revenues will be a little bit heavier at the end of the year, but we want to make sure we grab that money. Most expenses you can see throughout the year or throughout the quarter were down. We did change our budgeting process for salaries and wages in 2024, where we were not budgeting at full capacity for the entire year. This is one quarter of that activity, so again, also monitoring to see if that gets us closer to actual. And then in capital, we actually had some more dollars go out than we anticipated. So we are waiting on a lot of bus orders to come in 2024. We have 65 vehicles, maybe something like that coming in this year.
Total, we probably have,
Okay. So we expect those to come in this year. So we should see a big bump. with
And
it.
that's across vehicles, not
Correct.
just paratransit.
Yeah.
Yeah, van pools.
Again, I entertain any questions on Q1 2024.
Do you want to talk a little bit about financial plan?
Sure. We had a great meeting Tuesday with our financial planning consultants. So we sat down and looked at our financial strategy through 2040. And we had a good conversation about capital projects and things like BRT, on demand, Bellingham Station. And what we'll be doing in the next couple of weeks is laying out costs for each one of those projects and then layering them into the budget process. So rather than the board seeing and hearing about each project individually, and we're all saying that's a great idea, we want to lay them all out together so the board can see the impacts. And then we can start talking about trade-offs. What do we want to do? What can we not do? We're going to look at grant funding, so we'll identify what projects we would or would not do with grant funding. But our consultant was here and we had one online, so they were able to hear our conversations. So I have some homework to do, and then they're going to help us build a nice model where we can start pulling different levers and show the board the impacts. Revenues is a hard lever for us to pull. We don't have a lot of opportunity to increase revenue. There's fares. We have to increase fares a lot really to make a significant difference. So there's sales tax, and then there's grant revenues. Expenses is really the side where we could start to control that. But again, it is difficult because most of our expenses are related to people. And how do we make that balance? So we will be talking with the union when we start doing negotiations and showing them more of this information. So not just looking at the impact of salary and wages, but how that impacts the entire income statement, and really working on that partnership. If we do this, what's the impact of it? So super excited about it. It was a little overwhelming on Tuesday, but I think it will really help us as an agency move forward and try to achieve that 2040 plan and let the board make some informed decisions over that whole picture.
One of the things that the team came up with that we'll be doing on this is taking a programmatic approach to things. So tooth to tail analysis. So like for BRT, from now and in perpetuity, if that were to go in, what does that mean for operators, for route maintenance, for mechanics, for all that, so we can see a programmatic all-in cost of what that is as we're making a decision, as opposed to just looking at the construction cost, for example. So we know what the tail is on those, which will be good. And then the model that Shonda is kind of working on will allow us to, as we're talking trade-offs and things, to make changes in hopefully in real time to be able to see what the effects are of that. So if we were to not do service in this area and it saved X number of dollars, where would that go? And then that will enable us to talk about where that money could be put in investment. So hopefully it helps us talk about prioritized investments and how we're investing it, and then also sequencing of things where we can see where we're going to help develop a financial strategy to fund the things that the transformational things that we've been talking about. And as you all know from your council and executive jobs, that what this will hopefully allow us to do as well is be able to see where shortfalls are. So as we're talking about things and we're cobbling together, Scott and I were talking at the beginning about for public works projects, and now you have to cobble together all these various funding sources to make things work. This will help us identify where those are and be able to then make pitches for how we can fit those, or how we can cobble together those various funding sources.
Our consultant also is experienced in credit ratings and bond issues, so they can help us look at that too. If we have enough revenue to do a debt service fund, so they will provide a wide wealth of services for us. And Scott, we want to be able to answer your question that we brought up a few meetings ago, is if you save the money on the hop, where is that money going? Not just to your, we don't want it to just go to reserve, but where else can we deploy it? And I think this level of granularity will help us be able to answer that better.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
F3, first quarter 2024 performance report. Tim.
Okay, just mostly here, if you have any questions about the quarterly report, any of the accomplishments, we have staff here to answer any questions you might have about those line items. And then moving on to performance data on that second page, just showing, now we're kind of in a new cycle, starting with Q1 of 2024, comparing Q1 to 2020 through 2023. And you can see that we've had a fixed route. We've had that first graph on that page shows a bump up to about 1 million passengers for the first quarter. So a slight increase over 2023. So we continue to see increases in our ridership, and then productivity is about the same as Q4 2023. And then paratransit, you're seeing about the same level of boardings as last year, Q1, and again, leveling off of that productivity. And then in the van portion of that, with the last graphs in this chart, you're showing an increase up to 11 vans, and the subsequent ridership increases as a result of that. With that program, we've got 5 additional van groups that are on our waiting list. So we're seeing those increases, that increased interest in the capital program, and the need potentially for additional vehicles to accommodate those additional groups. So I have to answer any questions you have about graphs or accomplishments.
I guess, can we have one more year, 2019 added? Because that's the year that is kind of like a benchmark where we were before COVID. And because it's not in here, it looks like we're really growing. But I guess I want to know what it was compared to
2019.
And I anticipate that question. So Q1 of 2019 was 1.22 million, and we had a total of 4.45 million over the course of the year. So you have 4.5 million approximately whole year, and then so we're about 80% of the 2019 Q1 data. So we're comparing. You have to compare quarters, obviously, because there's so much variation there. But so we're about 80%.
Okay.
That Q1.
All right, anyone else?
Yeah, Dan over here. Just a
Oh,
quick question.
sorry, Dan.
Where does the hop land? Is that in the paratransit ridership?
That's a good question. Simple answer is no, it's not shown on this graph at all. We don't combine it with these other modes. So it doesn't show up in these graphs at all.
That's a great question.
But we do have the data for that. So we would be more than happy to provide the information on that.
All right, anyone else? Okay. Moving on to other business. Anything? No? All right. Announcements?
Like 2 things. One, for the board, June 2nd is, well, this Sunday is the rodeo. If you're interested, 8:30, I think. And then food and festivities, lots of fun. And then June 2nd is, which is a Sunday, is WTA at the Bells Day. If you want tickets, let us know on that. And then on June 11th is Transit Trivia Night at Larrabee Brewing. So if you're interested in a little trivia.
Is it going to be really hard?
Last year's, embarrassingly, I did not do that.
All right.
Fortunately, the team was strong.
That's good.
When is that?
June 11th.
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Can you ride the bus to Coronado and walk, right, Warren?
Yeah. Well, actually, our news service won't have to go on June 11th. Or on June 16th.
Yeah.
All right, any other announcements? We are adjourned.